Well, big mount news again. If you're struggling to keep up, at Path of Fire's launch, we had the Raptor, Springer, Skimmer, Jackal, and lastly, the fairly hidden and large paywalled Griffin. Then, a long break of not having any new mounts until the devs revealed in Season 4 they were going to drop new ones in without having to wait for full-on expansion. So we got the Roller Beetle, and then very recently the Warclaw for World vs. World, and now, today, mount number 8 has been revealed. It once again is a PvE mount. It once again is a flying-oriented mount. It's a wyvern called the Skyscale. There's been an interview with Eurogamer, who seemed to have got the scoop this time, and a trailer, which I'll show you guys now, and then we'll dive into how it works and why it's distinct from the already existing flying mount, the Griffin. So people fully up to date before today will have already had a glimpse of this thing. It appeared for a brief moment in a small teaser for the finale, War Eternal. I covered in a separate video earlier this week, you guys might want to check out. In it we saw a very small commander riding a new creature and came up with various theories about what it might mean. First of all, yeah, that does confirm this is a part of the finale. There is actually a quote several months old now from after the Roller Beetle where the devs tipped their hand that there might be another mount for the finale, and well, here it is. My theory from the teaser trailer I still stand by, that this last episode is probably going to involve aerial combat and content following a flying elder dragon. But since the Griffin, our current only way to do that, is sort of hidden behind a large paywall and a lot of achievements, frankly, the devs want to implement something new that isn't mount rentals, allowing everyone to participate in that. My guess is that in this episode, if you have both the Skyscale and the Griffin, you might be able to choose which you play the content on, but for people just getting in who haven't spent their time on the Griffin, they'll have the Skyscale to use as their main thing. This also makes me wonder if the theories about Aurene coming back are to be believed, and maybe we'll be able to ride on her. Does that mean she's going to have the Skyscale mechanics that we'll read about in an interview in a second? Or will she have her own mechanics too, essentially meaning the devs will have created 3 divergent airborne mounted experience, one for the Griffin, one for the Skyscale, and one potential sneaky extra thing with Aurene if she ever gets that epic and somewhat unexpected return to the story. I'm actually amazed at that idea, especially if when she returns, she'll be appearing much larger, like glint-sized or above, and then the question of riding her obviously would feel very different to being on these more comparatively small entities like the Skyscale and Griffin. So next I want to take us to the interview and article that came with the Skyscale trailer. It explains a little bit more as to what we've been looking at in the footage without me having to exhaustively do some kind of frame by frame and interpret it. So they open by really getting to the point. The question on our mind is definitely how is this different to the Griffin, and they say the Skyscale will be to Guild Wars 2 what a helicopter is to aviation in real life, I'm told. We talked about the Griffin, the in-game existing flying mount, being a jet engine, Lindsay Murdoch, the lead designer, said. It goes very fast in a straight line. But the Dragon is more like a helicopter, so it can take off from the ground and go up. It can gain altitude. The Griffin can't. So this is the distinction between them. The Griffin technically can gain altitude if you play perfectly, dipping down and boosting up and using the new endurance gaining mastery. It takes a really long time and is obviously not what the design is meant to be for, but you can gain infinite height with the Griffin. Well, this is a mount that is deliberately built to have that as a core mechanic. People, I think, mistakenly identify the Griffin as a flying mount, because really the way we use it is just a turbocharged gliding mount as it currently stands, with a limited capacity to climb. This thing is a true flying mount for Guild Wars 2. There's already a lot we can discuss with that, but let's stick with the interview for a second. The Skyscale has another trick up its scaly sleeve too. The really cool feature that surprised us all was wall jumping, or climbing, said Murdoch. The Skyscale can actually stick to the wall and regain some of his endurance, and then jump up and gain some altitude. In that way, she added, it can climb a cliff, reaching areas much higher than it otherwise could by flight alone. There is a suggestion here that purely flying up and up and up and up does have a limit. You would need to latch onto a cliff and then jump off of it and climb up and up and up again. So I do think it will be based on endurance, and it's not like you'll just be able to infinitely hit the skyboxes of every single map. That would be horrendously broken. I think the core idea of this mount in the first place feels pretty broken, and I'm going to be very curious to see how it interacts with Corteria, certainly. But they have got some kind of upper limit. You'll want cliffs to clamber off of. This idea of sticking to walls and basically being able to walk around on them, we have as a community talked about several times before, in particular prompted by the devs when we heard about the work in progress Path of Fire spider mount. Remember? The devs had this as an idea. They decided not to go for it because it triggered people's arachnophobia a little bit too much, I think was the answer. And we had all these discussions at the time as to how valid that was. But the idea of a mechanic where you'd have a mount that could climb on walls, an insecty mount, seemed to make a lot of sense. The devs do now seem to have rolled into the Skyscale. And, well, that definitely does make sense if it's all about going up. If you look at the trailer footage, you can see it in action. There is an important question here as well the interview ignores, and that is, what is a cliff? No, hear me out. They're using the word cliff rather than just surface. So I'm guessing it will only be specific kinds of terrain that you can walk around on. Kind of like how the roller beetle can only break through certain kinds of walls, or how the skimmer can only move faster over certain kinds of liquids and fluids that you'll be moving over. Now, that entire concept might be disappointing to you guys, and I'm not ruling out the idea that maybe you can just clamber around on whatever the hell you want, but it would make sense to me if the devs did something like this, because it stops the Skyscale completely and utterly breaking other maps in the game. Though, maybe at this point, they really don't care if you break out of maps on mounts going back to Corteria. It's already more than possible in a lot of those old maps, just where QA never managed to plaster invisible walls everywhere. But invisible walls are exactly what I'm talking about. We can't expect the Skyscale to be able to clamber around on those as surfaces, right? So the devs need to have some kind of mechanical way of distinguishing between the two, and if they've gone that far, maybe it's only specific cliffs that can climb around on, and maybe they'll be everywhere in this new map we're going to, and maybe they'll be everywhere in upcoming maps, but more limited in Corteria, because they don't want it to break stuff too much. Moving on with the interview, they say, being a dragon means naturally breathing fire. It's tied to a dismount ability. When you hop off, the Skyscale breathes a ring of fire, damaging enemies. You can see it in the video. And yes, indeed we can. This is actually a nice looking animation here. It reminds me of the Fire Wyvern from Heart of Thorns, the ranger pet you can pick up when you trigger that F2. And this is, if I'm reading the trailer right, the longest dismount animation we have. Usually they're quite short, snappy things, and here it feels like a whole long kind of skill animation we go through. How the damage of this will compare to the other ones, I don't know, but it also looks like this is the first time a dismount ability has a rolling AoE component to it. Most of them are single impacts and done. This looks like it might tick over time or apply condition damage too. And in that case, does the condi damage scale off of our gear and stuff? I guess we'll see. They say the Skyscale mount is coming to Guild Wars 2 in the game's next Living World story drop, Episode 6, War Eternal, which will be the final episode of the 4th season. I mean, for some reason there's still debate about this among people, but here's another sign. It is the finale. There's no release date for it yet, and yeah, that's an interesting thing to note. I think it is still probably owing to the layoffs, but we're getting all this juicy information about War Eternal before they've even given us a release date. It's nice for me, frankly, that I don't have to squeeze in every little bit of information they drop over just a small 7-day window, but we get to get it a bit more incrementally. They say the ante, though, has been upped. In the 5th episode, ArenaNet went Game of Thrones and dared to kill off a major character by the shocking and impressing fans. We saw a reaction trailer, blah, blah, blah. This isn't actually related to the Skyscale. Down here, they end by saying Murdoch wouldn't budge on plot details, understandably, but said there will be a course of new Golden Path storyline and a new map, as in all Season 4 episodes. The rest will be unveiled in a time. So it seems like they have been obligated, maybe, at least to some extent, to point out to their readership and their viewership that, hey, more stuff is going on than just a new mount, and I like that. But as far as we're concerned, those are the details we get from the Skyscale. Moving back to the trailer itself, for just a little bit of analysis, we can see some other things. First of all, more of the environment. More of the dragons in the background and the airships, and more of these cliffs. It does feel like there's a lot more land than the original teaser suggested. I actually wonder if the original teaser, we were standing on this cliff looking out over there. Is that the tree that was available before and the landmass on the right? We can see what look like some packed encampments, but here we have our commander on the Skyscale. The other thing that I'll note about it, as it flies off here, is it is quite small. It feels a bit smaller than the Griffin. Maybe wingspan included, it feels a bit bigger. But I don't know if this is just like a norm or the proportions are kind of weird. I wonder how this will look when we're on a char, definitely. Here, watch the animation closely. We jump off. Also, is this an NPC really far away or a mini? We jump off, and it does look like it has a bit of the Griffin's double jump to it. Watch. There, we like jump, and then you get the extra flap. It looks like you only get one extra flap. And maybe it's tied to endurance again. Maybe if this person triggered the bond of vigor and we saw the little icon above their head, we'd see they flap and flap and flap. Do they just take that entirely from the Griffin? I have to assume that some of the flight controls and attributes of the two mounts are going to cross over somewhere. And that initial double jump to get the bit of height to do something makes sense to me. Especially since the whole thing is about climbing up fast, but not moving horizontally as fast as the Griffin. But so here we see it flaps a few times and then we cut away to climbing on the edge of a cliff. Now, that entire cliff discussion I do still stand by, and I will note, though, that this doesn't have any kind of special texture or animation or telegraph on it. It looks pretty much like any old normal Path of Fire or Guild Wars 2 cliff asset, doesn't it? Maybe it's a little bit cragged. And the idea is we can sort of latch our talons into it or something. Maybe. But it looks pretty normal to me, so maybe you can climb on all cliffs. But here you'll see we're actually completely stuck to it, where any other mount would slide off and start falling there. And then we can jump off the side and get onto the roof. Lightning here as well, by the way. I think any number of indications that Kraukatoric, the Brandstorm, is around. More floating islands and more suggestion that there's an abyssal pit down here. I did point out on the previous teaser the idea that this could be some kind of dragon homeland within the mists. Remember that about half a year ago on the forums, there was this quote from a dev saying they would rather New Living World maps appear on the world map parchment. That meaning the in-game physical world map. So maybe it's not in the mists after all. I do like this philosophy, but breaking it for just one release, and especially a big prominent special one like the finale, I can imagine the devs doing. Look at the way they talked about Lake Doric in the past, all the while tongue-in-cheek knowing that it was actually coming back to the game. So here we get another shot, packed airship back here. It looks quite open, honestly, and like not much is really going on with these islands, doesn't it? Like there's no NPCs populating or enemies to fight. Feels kind of barren. Maybe that's not a relevant thing to point out with the way that the flow of this map plays. Maybe we move through these areas really quickly, but I thought I'd point it out. So yeah, once again, we get the jump and the flap. Now we get some kind of ability where we sort of rocket forward a bit, go down. That feels a bit like a Griffin dive, doesn't it? But of course, it's not taking us up. It's sort of taking us forward and down a bit. We're gliding down. I can't wait to see the developer live stream on Guild Chat where they talk about the design of this thing and everything that they were thinking about. We move along. This, again, that shot there was where it feels really small to me. This next shot is of the dismount. So, first of all, a lot going on. Spiritual-looking creatures. Again, this feels like the mist to me, but an actual discernible floor. It looks like a Heart of Thornsey area. A lot of Heart of Thornsey assets seem to have been used here, but of course, they could just be trying to show a jungly environment, not necessarily the Maguma jungle. We have Awakened Elementals, Unbound Magic to collect in the area, and yeah, these ghostly spiritual creatures. But watch the dismount. So right now, you're looking at the Skyscales above us, and the dismount has already been used, so the commander has dropped off in the first couple of frames. So we get to fight, and the mount persists above us, doing its thing before disappearing. This is brilliant. I remember one of my main points of feedback when we very first saw mounts as Path of Fire came out was that I didn't like how they couldn't realistically exist as separate entities to us. There was like no stable feature where we can climb off the raptor, but the raptor's still there and we can walk around it, maybe pet it or feed it and, you know, utilize whatever other mechanics the devs could have done. The mounts in this game are very much just kind of attached to us. We don't get to be separate from them. But it looks like with this dismount on this mount, you do get a bit of that sense because we are fighting and the mount is still there fighting alongside us, above us. And the reason this can work obviously is because they're above us so it doesn't cloud what goes on below, in theory. Though I wonder in large world bosses where we're holding our camera looking down like almost bird's eye, if a ton of players dismount this thing, is all we're going to see from the top down, a bunch of Skyscales circling, breathing fire. But here's the animation, watch. So we're here, fighting. It's above. I don't know why in the trailer they never got it in frame. This thing must look gorgeous, right? Breathing fire, and you can see another wing flap there after that little bit there as we fight. And the field lingers a while. It actually looks very similar to the Sabbatha flamethrower flames, which were deliberately tuned visually to be evident in massive raids. So visual creep there, I guess, a little bit. And then we come to the last shot of the trailer. Once again, I think where we start, and you can see one of the idle animations where it breathes a little bit of fire. I must admit, when I first saw the trailer, I thought that this was the breath attack that they talked about in the interview, but obviously not. I think it's just as it sits around, it breathes a bit of fire. How mount skins interact with these idols and probably change the colors with dyes and stuff remains to be seen. But look, he rolls away. And yeah, cute little guy. And that's it. Ride the Skyscale. That's what we've seen from the trailer. That's what we've got from this interview. I'm really eagerly awaiting ArenaNet talking in other avenues about what's going on here. But a big drop, really cool thing to hear about, and just an extra thing that should make this finale really freaking awesome. War Eternal still don't have a release date. I'll be sure to have a video for you when that happens. Stay tuned as well, by the way. If you missed it, I already did a video on a new patch that came to the game, adding new current events content where we go to the mists and close rifts and all this crazy stuff. And there was a new mysterious CGI advertisement trailer I've covered. And today, they released the next Requiem short story. Something I was scared the devs had actually forgotten about or wouldn't be happening after the layoffs. It's to do with Zephyra, which I have to work on next. So an utter deluge of news. I'll be sure to get that last video out for you guys as soon as possible. My poor Super Adventure Book series is getting totally drowned out. Let me know what you think in the comments. If I missed anything, I'll be sure to include it in an upcoming production. And I'll see you next time.